The wind carried the smell of dust and desperation through Bitter Springs that December morning. Cold bit through wool coats and leather gloves. The sky pressed down, heavy, the color of old bruises, threatening a storm that would bury everything in sand and ice. In the town square, a wooden platform stood like a gallows. 7 children lined up across it, small bodies rigid with fear, each wearing a numbered placard around their neck. Tags like you'd put on cattle. Number 1 through 7. Property to be auctioned, burdens to be sold. The crowd gathered thick around the platform. 50 people, maybe more. Some came out of curiosity. Some came with cash in their pockets and hunger in their eyes. Most came because Sheriff Victor Kane had made it clear that good citizens showed up when the law called. And in Bitter Springs, Victor Kane was the law. He stood center stage in his black duster coat hat, tilted just so silver badge, catching what little light broke through the clouds. 38 years old and handsome, in the way a rattlesnake is beautiful right before it strikes. His smile never reached his eyes. He raised a hand, and the murmuring crowd fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the annual orphan auction." His voice rang out cheerful, obscene in its pleasantness. Under the Territorial Act of 1882, these children represent a burden to our great state. We aim to find them homes, or at the very least employers who can put them to productive use. He gestured to the line of children like a carnival barker showing off prizes. Number 1, Thomas Brooks. 12 years old, skin dark as mahogany, jaw clenched so tight you could see the muscles jump, fists balled at his sides, eyes that refused to cry no matter what. He'd learned that lesson 3 years ago when they ripped him from his father's smithy and sold him south. Number 2, Clara Bennett. 8 years old, blonde hair tangled with dirt, honey-colored eyes too wide, too knowing for her age. Her right leg wrapped in dirty bandages where the bone had snapped. In her arms, a cornhusk doll, the only thing she'd carried out of the desert when her mother left her there to die. Number 3, Anna Moretti. 10 years old, wild curly hair that wouldn't be tamed, olive skin, burned dark by sun and defiance. The look on her face said she'd bite anyone who came close. She'd already tried to run twice. They'd caught her both times. Now she stood there vibrating with rage, planning her next escape. Number 4, Samuel Chen. 9 years old, thick spectacles perched on a thin nose body, so frail a strong wind might snap him in half. But behind those glasses, eyes sharp as broken glass, calculating, recording, remembering every face that looked at him like merchandise. Number 5, Emily Rodriguez. 6 years old, black hair hanging limp, enormous eyes that stared at nothing. She clutched her own cornhusk doll like it was the last piece of her soul. 2 years since she'd spoken a word. Some said she was mute. Others said she'd just seen too much. Number 6 and 7, David and Rachel Stone. 4 years old twins, red hair, bright as copper freckles, like constellations across pale faces. They held hands so tight their fingers had gone white. Wherever one went, the other followed. They understood nothing except that the world was terrifying, and all they had was each other. Victor Kane stepped to the front of the platform and raised his auctioneer's gavel. "Let's start with number 1, Thomas Brooks, 12 years old, strong as an ox, knows his way around a forge." He paused for effect. Opening bid, $50. A fat man in the front row raised his hand. 50. Another voice from the back. 60. A mine owner near the side. 75. The bids rose like bile. Thomas stood perfectly still, staring straight ahead, willing himself to become stone. Clara, number 2, took a stumbling step forward. Her broken leg buckled, but she caught herself. "No, Thomas is our brother. You can't sell him? You can't split us up." Victor Kane turned to her slowly. His smile widened. Now, little girl. The adults are conducting business here." Clara's voice came out desperate, cracking. "Please, he's the only one who protects us. If you take him." The slap rang out like a gunshot. Victor's open palm caught Clara across the face hard enough to spin her small body halfway around. She fell. The cornhusk doll flew from her hands and landed in the dirt. Blood welled from her split lip, bright red against pale skin. The crowd went silent. Some looked away. A few smiled. Most did nothing at all. Clara lay there in the dirt, one hand pressed to her face, the other reaching weakly for her doll. She didn't cry. She'd learned, like Thomas, that tears only made it worse. Then a voice cut through the silence like a knife through soft flesh. Cold, calm, absolute. $500 for all 7. Every head turned. At the edge of the crowd stood a man who looked like he'd been carved from the desert itself. 44 years old, but weathered enough to pass for 60. Silver streaked through black hair at his temples. A brown duster coat hung on a frame that had once been broader now, lean and hard from 15 years of living alone. Blue eyes the color of winter ice. Scars mapped across weathered skin. A Colt revolver rode low on his hip, worn smooth from years of use. Jackson Matthews, the man they'd once called the Reaper, the man who'd supposedly died in Abilene over a card game. Victor Kane's smile froze, then slowly transformed into something uglier. Well, old man Matthews, I heard you were dead." "You heard wrong." Jack's voice carried no emotion. He might have been discussing the weather, but his hand rested on the butt of his Colt casual ready. $500, Jack repeated. "More than enough to clear whatever debt these children supposedly owe the territory? I'll take all 7, right now." Victor's eyes narrowed. "They're not a package deal, old-timer." Jack took 3 steps forward. The crowd parted without thinking. Something about the way he moved, the way violence lived just beneath his stillness, made people remember to breathe quietly. "They are now." Jack stopped 10 feet from the platform. "I'm not letting you split them up. 500 or I ride to San Antonio and bring back the federal marshal. We both know what you're really doing here, Kane. Child trafficking is a federal crime." 10 seconds of silence. You could hear the wind whistling between buildings. Victor's deputies shifted nervously hands near their guns, but nobody wanted to be the first to draw on Jackson Matthews. Victor did the math. $500 was good money. And Matthews was dangerous. The stories about Abilene might be exaggerated, but the stories about the 7 Comancheros he'd killed in one night back in '72 were not. Victor raised his gavel and brought it down sharp. "Sold $500 to the crazy old fool who thinks he can handle 7 mouths to feed." The crowd laughed. Nervous laughter, but laughter nonetheless. Jack didn't laugh. He walked to the platform and began counting out bills. Each one represented weeks of work, pelts sold, odd jobs done for ranchers who didn't ask questions, 15 years of savings laid out on a wooden board to buy 7 lives. Victor took the money, counted it twice, and pocketed it. He leaned in close enough that only Jack could hear. "You'll regret this, Matthews. These 7 freaks will destroy you. I give it 2 weeks before you come crawling back begging me to take them off your hands." Jack met his eyes without blinking. "They're not animals to be returned. They're children." He turned to the 7 kids still standing on the platform. 7 pairs of eyes stared at him with varying shades of fear, suspicion, and desperate, dying hope. Jack's hand trembled slightly, just for a second. Then he clenched his fist, and the tremor stopped. "My name is Jackson Matthews," he said quietly, but his voice carried. "You can call me Jack. I live 20 miles northeast at Cole Ranch. I have a house. I have food. I have beds. I don't hit. I don't yell. If any of you want to leave, I'll take you anywhere you want to go. If you want to stay, I'll do my best." Silence. 7 children who'd been lied to before, promised things before, abandoned before. Jack saw Clara's corn husk doll in the dirt. He bent down, picked it up carefully, brushed off the dust. "You drop this." He held it out to Clara. She stared at the doll, then at his hand, then at his face, looking for the trap, the cruelty, the moment when kindness would transform into something terrible. Jack waited. He didn't move closer, didn't force it, just held out the doll with infinite patience. Slowly, Clara reached out. Her small hand shook as she took the doll. Their fingers touched for just a second. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome." Jack straightened and looked at all 7 of them. "Let's go home." The ride back to Cole Ranch took 3 hours. Jack rode his gray mare Ash. The 7 children sat in 2 wagons he'd borrowed from Marcus Wells, the blacksmith, whose son had been sold to Louisiana 3 years prior. Clara sat in the front wagon, clutching her cornhusk doll, watching Jack's back. Thomas sat rigid, arms crossed, face a mask. Anna glared at everything. Samuel studied the landscape with those calculating eyes. Emily stared at nothing, silent. The twins, David and Rachel, held hands and cried softly. Jack didn't talk. He just rode steady, leading them through the cold December afternoon toward something none of them quite dared to believe in yet. As they traveled, Jack's mind drifted backward. 15 years, a lifetime ago, to the last time he'd believed the world could be good. Colorado, the winter of 1869. Cole Ranch, before it became a tomb. Sarah Matthews, at 27, brown hair braided down her back, apron dusted with flour, laughing at something Jack had said. Her belly swollen 6 months with their first child. The kitchen warm with cooking smells and promises. "Jack, what should we name the baby? If it's a boy, Samuel. If it's a girl, Emily. Emily Matthews, I like that." She'd turned to him smiling, and for that moment, everything in Jack's world made sense. Then the door burst open. 5 men on horseback. Comancheros come to steal whatever they could carry. Jack had gone for his gun. He'd killed 2 of them in the front yard. But he'd taken a bullet to the shoulder. He'd fallen. The leader had dragged Sarah out of the house. Jack had crawled toward them, leaving a trail of blood in the snow, begging, pleading. The leader had shot Sarah in the stomach, once, deliberately. Jack had killed the remaining 3, but it was too late. Sarah had died in his arms on the porch of their home, blood soaking through her dress, their unborn child dying with her. Her last words whispered as her eyes dimmed. Jack promised me something. Anything. Sarah, anything. Don't live in grief forever. Find someone who needs you. Save them, like you saved me. Sarah, don't leave me, please. Promise. I promise. She'd smiled. Then she was gone. Jack had buried her behind the house. He'd buried the child who would have been named Samuel or Emily, and then he'd stopped living. For 15 years he'd existed, survived, moved through days like a ghost. The man they'd called the Reaper had become a hollow shell hiding from a world that had taken everything. Until this morning. Until he'd seen 7 children standing on an auction block and heard Sarah's voice in his memory. Find someone who needs you. Save them. The wagons creaked to a stop. Jack looked up and realized they'd arrived. Cole Ranch spread before them, weathered and worn but still standing, a 2-story wooden house with peeling white paint. A barn, one corner collapsed, empty chicken coops, an overgrown garden, 15 years of neglect written across every surface. But the bones were good, the structure sound. It could be repaired, rebuilt, made into a home again if anyone cared enough to try. The 7 children climbed down from the wagons and stood in a small cluster, looking at the ranch like it might bite them. Anna spoke first, her voice dripping with 10-year-old disdain. "This is a pig pen. You expect us to live here?" Jack turned to face them. Studied each young face, each set of frightened, angry, desperate eyes. "Inside is cleaner than it looks. I spent yesterday preparing rooms upstairs. 3 bedrooms. Enough beds for everyone." Thomas, the 12-year-old with the stone face, stepped forward. "Why'd you do it?" "Buy 7 kids you don't even know." The question hung in the cold air. 6 other children waited for the answer. This was the moment. The moment Jack either lied or told them a truth he hadn't spoken aloud in 15 years. Jack knelt down so he was eye level with them. His knees protested, his back ached. He ignored it all. 15 years ago, my wife died. Her name was Sarah. His voice caught on the name. She made me promise something before she died. She told me to find someone who needed me and save them. I didn't keep that promise, not for 15 years. Not until I saw you 7 standing on that platform this morning. The children stared at him. This was not the answer they'd expected. "I don't expect you to call me father. I don't expect you to love me. I'm just asking for one thing. Let me prove that not every adult will abandon you." Silence stretched. Then Clara, the 8-year-old with the broken leg, spoke in a voice so small it was almost lost in the wind. "How long? How long what? How long until you sell us back, or get tired and throw us out, or change your mind?" Her voice cracked. "Grown-ups always say forever, but they only mean a few weeks." Jack looked into those honey-colored eyes and saw every betrayal, every broken promise, every moment of abandonment written across her young soul. "My wife taught me something," he said quietly. "A promise doesn't have an expiration date. You either keep it or you break it. I promise you, all 7 of you, this ranch is your home for as long as you want it, 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, until I die. Whichever comes first." Something shifted in Clara's expression. The fortress walls around her heart didn't fall, but maybe a tiny crack appeared. She took 1 step toward Jack, then another. Then she was close enough that he could see the blood still drying on her split lip from Victor's slap. Tears started falling. Not the tears of pain or fear she'd held back all day. These were different. These were the tears of a child who'd been dying of thirst and just heard the sound of water. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "Then believe me." Clara collapsed against Jack's chest, sobbing. Her small body shook with the force of it. Jack froze for a second, unsure, his hands hovering awkwardly. He hadn't held a child in 15 years, hadn't held anyone. Then slowly, carefully, he put his arms around her and held her while she cried. Emily, the silent 6-year-old, stepped forward. She didn't say anything. She just walked up to Jack and wrapped her arms around his leg, pressing her face against his knee. Her corn-husked doll fell to the ground, forgotten for the first time in 2 years. David and Rachel, the 4-year-old twins, looked at each other with that silent twin communication. Then they both ran forward and grabbed onto Jack's other leg, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. Anna turned away, but not before Jack saw her wipe her eyes. Samuel pushed his glasses up and stared very hard at the barn. Thomas remained standing apart, arms crossed, but his jaw wasn't quite so tight anymore. Jack knelt there in the dirt of his ranch, surrounded by broken children, and felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Purpose. That night, as the 7 children settled into their rooms upstairs, Jack walked out to the barn. He climbed up to the loft where he'd slept for 15 years, unable to enter the bedroom he'd shared with Sarah. He looked at the house. Lights glowed in the upstairs windows. Shadows moved behind curtains. The sounds of children's voices drifted out quiet and uncertain. But there. Jack pulled out a worn photograph from his coat pocket. Sarah smiling at the camera on their wedding day. Beautiful and full of hope and alive. "I did it, Sarah," he whispered to the image. "I found 7 people who needed me. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know how to be a father, but I'm going to try. I promise I'm going to try." The wind picked up cold and sharp. Jack thought he could smell Sarah's perfume just for a second. Roses and vanilla. Then it was gone. He tucked the photograph away and lay back on his bedroll, staring up at the barn rafters. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Victor Kane wouldn't let this go easily. The children would test him. There would be nightmares and fights and moments when he questioned everything. But tonight, for the first time in 15 years, Jackson Matthews fell asleep knowing he had a reason to wake up in the morning. 7 reasons. The house smelled of dust and disuse and 15 years of grief. Jack lit lamps as the 7 children filed inside, their footsteps echoing on hardwood floors that hadn't heard the sound of young voices in more than a decade. Clara limped slowly, favoring her broken leg. Thomas stayed close to her, one hand hovering near her elbow, ready to catch her if she fell. Anna prowled the perimeter like a caged animal, testing doors, checking windows, mapping escape routes. Samuel pushed his glasses up and studied everything with those calculating eyes, noting exits, weak points, defensive positions. Emily drifted silent as Smoke, the corn-husk doll, clutched tight against her chest. The twins, David and Rachel, refused to let go of each other's hands, even for a second. Jack led them upstairs. 3 bedrooms lined the hallway. He'd spent the previous day hauling mattresses from storage, beating dust from blankets scrubbing floors until his knuckles bled. "Girls can take the 2 rooms on the left," he said quietly. "Boys take the room on the right, or you can arrange it however you want. Your choice." Anna whipped around, suspicion sharp in her dark eyes. "Where are you sleeping?" Jack met her gaze without flinching. "The barn. There's a loft above the horse stalls. I've slept there for 15 years, Clara's small voice came from behind Thomas. "Why not sleep in the house?" Jack's throat went tight. He looked down the hall toward the closed door at the end, the master bedroom, Sarah's room. The room where he'd carried her across the threshold on their wedding day. The room he hadn't entered since the morning he'd found her cold in their bed 3 days after the Comancheros. "That room belonged to my wife," he said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. "I don't use it anymore, and I want you all to feel safe. I won't be in the house at night unless you give me permission." Thomas studied Jack's face for a long moment. 12 years old, but with eyes that had seen too much, learned too early that adults lied. "You're not going to make us call you something, Father, Sir Master." The word master made Jack's jaw clench. He forced himself to breathe slowly. "Call me Jack, or Mr. Matthews, or that old man. Whatever feels right to you. Names have to be earned, not forced." Samuel, the 9-year-old with the thick glasses, stepped forward. His voice came out quiet but sharp. "What happens if one of us tries to run away tonight?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Jack knelt down slowly so he was eye level with the boy. "I'd be sad, but I won't lock the doors. Freedom is a right, not a privilege." 7 children stared at him. None of them had ever heard an adult say anything like that before. Jack stood his knees, protesting. "There's bread and cheese in the kitchen if anyone's hungry. I'll be in the barn if you need me. Just call out." "I'll hear you." He turned and walked down the stairs, his boots heavy on the wood. Behind him, he heard whispers, the children conferring, trying to decide if this was real or just another elaborate trap. Jack crossed the yard to the barn as the last light bled from the sky. He climbed to the loft and spread out his bedroll in the same spot he'd slept every night for 15 years. Through the window, he could see the house. Lamplight glowed in the upstairs windows. Shadows moved behind curtains. 7 children. 7 lives. 7 chances to either save something or destroy it completely. Jack lay back and stared at the barn rafters and wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. 2 hours past midnight, Jack woke to the sound of screaming. He rolled out of the bedroll, grabbed his Colt out of pure instinct, and was halfway down the ladder before his mind caught up to his body. Not a threat, not an attack. A child's scream. Terror, not pain. He ran across the yard, boots crunching on frost, and burst through the front door. The screaming came from upstairs, Clara's voice high and desperate. "Mama! Mama, don't leave me. Please, Mama, come back." Jack took the stairs 3 at a time. The girl's bedroom door stood open. Inside, Clara sat bolt upright in bed, eyes wide and unseeing, still trapped in whatever nightmare had her by the throat. Sweat soaked through her nightgown. Her small body shook. Emily sat beside her, arms wrapped around Clara's shoulders, making soft, hushing sounds, even though she couldn't speak. David and Rachel stood in the doorway, in their nightclothes, holding hands, crying softly because Clara was crying. Jack stopped in the doorway. His hand started to shake. The tremor ran up his arm, the same one that had plagued him for 15 years. He saw Clara, but he also saw another child. A 6-year-old girl in a saloon in Abilene. The daughter of the outlaw Jack had been hunting. The girl who'd been hiding under the table when Jack fired through it. The girl who'd looked up at him with wide, uncomprehending eyes as blood spread across her small chest. "Mama, it hurts." Anna appeared beside Jack, her voice cutting through his paralysis. "Are you going to stand there or help her?" Jack swallowed hard, forced his hand to stop shaking through sheer will. He walked into the room slowly, making noise so Clara would know he was coming. He sat on the edge of the bed, careful to keep 2 feet of distance between them. "Clara." His voice came out gentle, the way he used to talk to spooked horses. "Clara, you're safe. You're at Cole Ranch. Nobody's leaving you." Clara's eyes focused on him slowly. The nightmare still had its claws in her. "Mama said," her voice broke, "Mama said if I wasn't good, she'd have to sell me. She said Victor would hurt me if she didn't sign the papers." A flash of memory. 5 seconds, but it told Jack everything he needed to know. Anna Bennett, Clara's mother, drunk at the Lucky Star Saloon. Victor Kane standing over her, a contract in one hand, a knife in the other, describing in precise detail what he'd do to Clara if Anna didn't sign. "Your mama made a mistake," Jack said quietly. "Not because she didn't love you. She was scared. Scared people do things they regret, but that doesn't mean you deserved any of it." Clara's whole body trembled. "You promise you won't sell me?" Jack held out his hand, palm up, not reaching for her, just offering. "Put your hand in mine, voluntary, and I'll make you a promise." Clara stared at his hand for 10 seconds that felt like 10 years. Then slowly, so slowly, she placed her small hand in his calloused palm. Jack closed his fingers gently around hers. Jackson Matthews, promise before these 7 children that Clara Bennett will never be sold, abandoned, or harmed by me. If I break this promise, I'm not worthy to be called a man." The words hung in the air like a vow spoken in church. Clara made a sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp. Then she threw herself forward and wrapped her arms around Jack's neck, crying into his shoulder. Jack froze. He didn't know what to do with his hands, didn't know how to hold a crying child. It had been so long, so impossibly long. Slowly, awkwardly, he put one arm around her back and patted gently. "It's all right," he whispered. "You're all right now." Emily climbed onto the bed and pressed herself against Jack's other side. Still silent, but her arms went around his waist. David and Rachel toddled over and grabbed onto his legs. Anna turned away, but not before Jack saw her wipe her eyes with the back of her hand. Thomas stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face still guarded. But something in his expression had softened, just a fraction. Jack sat there surrounded by broken children and felt the weight of every promise he'd ever broken pressing down on him. But he also felt something else, something he hadn't felt since Sarah died. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, he could keep this one. Morning came cold and bright. Jack woke in the barn, climbed down from the loft, and found all 7 children already awake, sitting at the kitchen table, in silence waiting. They looked at him like he might disappear if they blinked. Jack cleared his throat. "I'm making breakfast. Who wants eggs?" 6 hands went up. Emily just stared, but Jack was learning to read her silences. He counted 7. As he cooked, Jack spoke without turning around. "This ranch needs work, a lot of work, but I'm not going to force you to do anything. I'm asking. Anyone who wants to help, I'd appreciate it. Anyone who doesn't, that's fine too." Thomas stood up. The 12-year-old moved to stand beside Jack at the stove. "I can work. My father was a blacksmith before." He stopped. "Before Victor sold me to the plantation. If you have tools, I can learn to forge." Jack looked at the boy, really looked, saw the hunger there, not for food, for purpose, for a way to prove he was worth something. "Marcus Wells is your father. I know him. Good man. And yes, I have a forge in the barn. Needs repair, but we can fix it together." Jack paused. "And Thomas, after we get settled, I'm going to write to Louisiana, find out where they sent you. Get you back to your father if I can." Thomas's stone face cracked. His eyes went wide, then filled with tears. A 12-year-old boy who'd convinced himself he'd never see his father again, suddenly faced with hope he didn't dare believe in. He turned away quickly, but not before Jack saw him wipe his face. Anna pushed back from the table chair, scraping loud. "I want to learn to shoot." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Her voice came out hard angry, but underneath it, Jack heard terror. "So nobody can ever make me a slave again. Next time I'll shoot them first." Jack studied her for a long moment, this 10-year-old girl with rage burning in her eyes and trauma written across her soul. "All right," he said finally. "But first you learn gun safety. A weapon isn't a toy, it's a responsibility." Anna's chin came up defiant. "I can handle it." "I believe you can." Samuel raised his hand like he was in school. "Mr. Matthews, I'm good with numbers. If you need someone to keep books track expenses, I could do that." Jack nodded. "Ranch needs an accountant. Job's yours." Clara spoke up, her voice small but determined. "I want to learn to cook, like your wife Sarah used to." Jack's hand stilled on the spatula. He closed his eyes for just a second, gathering himself. "Sarah was a wonderful cook. Her recipes are still in the drawer over there. You can use them." Emily tugged on Jack's sleeve. When he looked down, she pointed out the window toward the overgrown garden. "You want to tend the garden?" Emily nodded. That was Sarah's garden, too. She'd be happy to know someone's caring for it again. David and Rachel, the 4-year-old twins, looked up at Jack with identical expressions of uncertainty. "What can we do? We're too little." Jack knelt down so he was at their level. "You two have the most important job of all. You remind me to smile." Rachel's face scrunched up in confusion. "That's not a real job." "It's the realest job there is." 3 days passed. 3 days of watching 7 children slowly, cautiously begin to believe that maybe this wasn't another trap, that maybe this strange old man actually meant what he said, but Anna still needed to test it. On the 3rd afternoon, she disappeared. Jack noticed first when he did a head count at dinner. 6 children at the table, 1 missing. "Where's Anna?" Thomas shook his head. Samuel pushed his glasses up nervously. Clara bit her lip. "She said she needed to check something in the barn." Jack stood up slowly. "How long ago?" 3 hours. Jack grabbed his coat and headed outside. The sun was setting, temperature dropping fast. He searched the barn, the chicken coops, the old smokehouse. Nothing. He found her 3 hours later in the barn loft, sitting on ash, his gray mare without permission. The horse shifted nervously under the unfamiliar weight. Anna sat, rigid hands gripping the reins too tight, chin up, eyes blazing with challenge. Jack walked slowly into the barn. "Anna, get down from the horse." "No." "Anna, what are you going to do? Hit me. Lock me in a closet. Sell me back to Victor." Jack stopped 10 feet away. Took a long, slow breath. "No, but you promise to stay here and learn the rules. Rule number 1 is you don't touch Ash without asking. She's skittish around strangers. She could throw you and break your neck." Anna's voice came out sharp, cruel, desperate. "I don't care if I die." The words hit Jack like a fist to the gut, because he recognized them. He'd thought the exact same thing for 15 years. Jack sat down on a hay bale, let all the anger drain out of his body. "I know," he said quietly. "Because of what you've been through, dying seems easier than living. But Anna, if you die, the other 6 children will hurt, especially Clara. That little girl looks at you like you're her big sister." Anna's hands loosened slightly on the reins. Jack continued, his voice steady. "You're testing me, seeing if I'll throw you out when you're difficult. The answer is no. You can burn down this barn. You can curse at me. You can break every rule I set. I still won't abandon you, because you deserve a home, not because you're good, because you're a person." Anna's face crumpled. The defiance shattered like glass, and underneath it was a 10-year-old child who'd been hurt so many times she couldn't believe in kindness anymore. She slid down from the horse and ran to Jack, slamming into him, arms wrapping around his waist, crying into his shirt. I'm sorry. I don't know how else to be. I'm so scared all the time." Jack held her, and this time his hands didn't shake. "I know, but you're safe now. I promise you're safe." That evening, all 8 of them sat around the table for the first meal they'd truly cooked together. Clara had made soup using Sarah's recipe with help from Jack. Samuel had set the table with mathematical precision. Anna had washed the vegetables, still sniffling. Thomas had chopped wood for the stove. Emily had picked winter herbs from the garden. David and Rachel had folded napkins with intense concentration. Jack looked around the table at 7 children who 3 days ago had been strangers and now felt like something else, something he didn't have a word for yet. Clara spoke up, her voice soft. "Mr. Jack, did your wife Sarah pray before meals?" Jack's throat tightened. "She did." every night. "Could you pray for us like she used to?" Jack hadn't prayed in 15 years, hadn't believed in anything except grief and guilt. But he bowed his head. "Lord, thank you for this food. Thank you for these 7 children. I don't know why you brought them to me, but I promise I'll do my best by them. I'll protect them, teach them, and love them the way Sarah loved me. Amen." 7 small voices echoed, "Amen." Silence settled comfortable for the first time. Then David, the 4-year-old, looked up at Jack with enormous eyes. "Mr. Jack, can you be our papa?" Everything stopped. Clara froze with her spoon halfway to her mouth. Thomas's eyes went wide. Anna stared. Samuel pushed his glasses up nervously. Emily watched Jack's face carefully. Rachel nodded agreement with her twin. Jack's vision blurred. He blinked hard. "You want to call me Papa?" David nodded. Rachel nodded. They were too young to understand the weight of what they were asking, but they understood enough. Jack looked at each child in turn. "If that's what you want, I'll try my best to earn it." Clara smiled. It was small, tentative, but it was real. "Papa Jack." Thomas, still guarded but softening, managed a nod. "Jack?" Anna whispered, "Sir?" Samuel said formally, "Mr. Matthews." Emily, who hadn't spoken in 2 years, stepped around the table and hugged Jack. She didn't say anything, but her eyes said everything. Jack wrapped his arms around all of them, this impossible family he'd bought for $500 and was learning to love for free. After the children went to bed, Jack walked out to the barn. He climbed to the loft and looked at the stars through the gaps in the roof. "Sarah," he whispered to the night, "can you see this 7 children? 7 reasons to wake up. I'm trying. I swear I'm trying not to break them the way I'm broken." The wind picked up cold and sharp. For just a second, Jack thought he smelled roses and vanilla. Sarah's perfume. Then it was gone. Jack lay back on his bedroll, but something kept him from sleeping. An itch at the back of his neck. The feeling of being watched. He stood and moved to the window. Far out on the ridge, maybe a mile away, a figure sat on horseback. Too dark to see details, but Jack knew. Some instinct told him exactly who it was. Victor Kane watching the ranch through a spyglass. Jack's hand moved to his Colt. He stood there in the window, letting Victor see him, sending a silent message. "I see you too." After a long moment, the figure on the ridge turned and rode away. Jack stayed at the window for another hour, watching the darkness, knowing this peace was temporary. Knowing Victor Kane wouldn't let this stand. 3 days. He'd had 3 days of building something fragile. And good, the storm was coming. Jack could feel it in his bones. But tomorrow he'd wake up. He'd make breakfast for 7 children. He'd teach Thomas to forge. He'd show Anna how to hold a rifle. He'd help Clara practice her letters. He'd work in the garden with Emily. He'd go over accounts with Samuel. He'd play with David and Rachel. He'd be Papa Jack, for however long he was allowed to be. The first 3 days passed like a dream Jack was afraid to wake from. The morning after Anna's test, Jack started teaching her to shoot. They stood in the backfield, tin cans lined up on fence posts. Anna held the rifle too tight at first, her whole body rigid with determination. "Breathe," Jack said quietly. "The gun is an extension of your arm, not a club. Gentle pressure on the trigger." She fired. The shot went wide, kicking up dirt 3 feet to the left of the target. Anna's face flushed with frustration. "Again," Jack said. "You're rushing. Breathe, aim, squeeze." She fired again. This time the bullet pinged off the fence post inches from the can. By the 10th shot she hit her first target. The can flew backward, clattering into the dirt. Anna turned to Jack, eyes wide with something like wonder. "I did it." "You did. Now do it 9 more times." By sunset she'd hit 7 out of 10. Her shoulder would be bruised tomorrow from the rifle's kick, but her smile was genuine, real. Thomas spent his days at the forge, with Jack learning to coax metal into submission with heat and hammer. The 12-year-old had strong hands and his father's instinct for the work. Jack showed him how to repair broken tools, how to shoe a horse, how to make something useful from raw iron. "Your father would be proud," Jack said one afternoon, watching Thomas shape a horseshoe with careful, precise strikes. Thomas's hammer paused for just a second. "You really think you can find him?" Jack met his eyes. "I'm going to try. Marcus Wells deserves to know his son is alive. And you deserve to have your father back." Clara worked in the kitchen, following Sarah's old recipes with determined concentration. Her broken leg still pained her, but she hobbled around on a makeshift crutch Thomas had carved. The first batch of biscuits came out burned. The second batch was edible. By the 3rd day, she made soup that actually tasted good. Jack ate 3 bowls and told her it was the best meal he'd had in 15 years. He wasn't lying. Samuel took over the ranch accounts with the seriousness of a bank president. He discovered Jack had been losing money on hay purchases for 3 years because he hadn't noticed the supplier had been shorting him 2 bales per delivery. "Mr. Matthews, you need to be more careful," the 9-year-old said, pushing his glasses up. "At this rate, you'll be bankrupt in 4 years." "Then it's a good thing I hired an accountant." Emily worked in the garden every day, silent but content. She cleared weeds, turned soil that had gone hard from neglect, planted winter vegetables that might survive if the frost held off. Jack watched her from the kitchen window, sometimes this tiny 6-year-old girl bringing life back to the place where Sarah had once made things grow. David and Rachel followed Jack everywhere, a pair of chattering shadows asking 10,000 questions. Why is the sky blue? Where do chickens come from? How old are you? Do you have a birthday? Can we have a party? Jack answered every question with patience he didn't know he possessed, because their joy was infectious. Their laughter reminded him what happiness sounded like. On the 5th evening, all 8 of them worked together to repair a section of the barn roof that had collapsed. Thomas hammered nails. Anna held boards steady. Samuel calculated angles. Clara handed up tools despite her bad leg. Emily brought water. David and Rachel collected fallen nails in a bucket. They finished as the sun set, painting the sky gold and orange and red. All of them stood in the yard sweating despite the December cold, looking at what they'd built together. Jack looked at their faces, dirty, tired, smiling. This is what family looks like, he thought. This is what Sarah wanted me to find. Clara moved to stand beside him. Papa Jack, is this what a family is supposed to feel like? Jack's throat went tight. Yes, Clara, I think it is. That night they all sat on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets, watching stars appear one by one. Nobody wanted to go inside. Nobody wanted this moment to end, because somewhere deep in their bones, all of them knew it was too good to last. The rider came at dawn on the 6th day, a U.S. Marshal's deputy badge gleaming on his chest, sitting straight in the saddle with the bearing of a man delivering official business. Jack met him in the yard. The 7 children watched from the porch, tension rippling through them like wind through grass. The deputy handed Jack an envelope, heavy paper, official seal, the kind of letter that changed lives. From the Territorial Court, Bitter Springs, Judge Blackwood presiding. Jack took the envelope. His hands didn't shake, but it was a close thing. The deputy tipped his hat and rode away. Jack stood there holding the envelope like it might bite him. 7 pairs of eyes burned into his back. Finally, he broke the seal and pulled out the letter. His eyes scanned the official language, the legal terminology, the words that fell like hammer blows. Thomas spoke from the porch, his voice careful. "What is it?" Jack read the letter again, slower, hoping he'd misunderstood, but the words didn't change. He turned to face the children. "It's from Judge Blackwood. He's voiding the auction. Says I'm not qualified to be a guardian." The silence that followed was the silence of a world ending. Anna found her voice first sharp with betrayal. "What does that mean?" Jack's jaw clenched. "It means the court is declaring the sale invalid. Says I don't meet the requirements. Single man, no wife, no stable income, history of violence." He kept reading each word, cutting deeper. "No social assessment, no home study, not fit to raise children." Samuel, the 9-year-old with the quick mind, stepped forward. "What happens to us?" Jack forced himself to read the final paragraph. "You'll be redistributed to appropriate families or placed in territorial institutions. Collection date is set for January 5th. Clara's voice came out small and broken. "They're going to split us up." Jack crumpled the letter in his fist. "I won't let that happen." But Thomas, 12 years old and too smart for comfort, shook his head. "How can you stop it? This is the law. You can't fight the law." The truth of it hit Jack like a gut punch. Because Thomas was right. What could one man do against the entire legal system? Anna slammed her fist against the porch railing hard enough to split skin. I told you, nobody keeps us, nobody." Clara started crying, silent tears that hurt worse than screaming. Emily clutched her cornhusk doll so tight the dried corn husks cracked. David and Rachel grabbed each other and wouldn't let go. Samuel pushed his glasses up with shaking hands. "How many days do we have?" Jack looked at the date on the letter. 8 days. That's not enough time to appeal, not through proper channels. Thomas's face had gone hard again, all the softness of the past 5 days vanishing like it had never been. "I knew this would happen. I knew we couldn't keep this. Nothing good ever lasts." He turned and walked into the house. The door closed with quiet finality. Jack stood in the yard surrounded by 6 crying children and felt more helpless than he'd felt since Sarah died in his arms. That afternoon, A second visitor arrived. This one didn't bother knocking. Victor Kane rode up to the ranch with 2 deputies flanking him, all 3 men, armed, all 3 wearing the smug expressions of people who'd already won. Jack stepped out onto the porch. His hand rested on his Colt casual but ready. "Kane." "Matthews." Victor smiled, and it was the smile of a snake that had just swallowed something whole. "Heard you got some unfortunate news from the court. You're behind this." "Me, I'm just a concerned public servant. Filed a report with Judge Blackwood about your, shall we say, questionable fitness as a guardian." Victor leaned forward in his saddle. 44-year-old bachelor living alone with 7 children, 5 of them girls. People talk Matthews. They wonder about a man who'd want that kind of arrangement. Jack's blood turned to ice, then to fire. "Say that again." Victor's smile widened. "I'm not saying anything, but other people might. They might ask questions. Wonder if your interest in those children is appropriate." Jack took 2 steps forward before he caught himself. His hand gripped the Colt so hard, his knuckles went white. "You son of a—" "Careful now." Victor's deputies shifted hands, moving toward their guns. "Threatening a law officer in front of witnesses. That won't help your case any." From the window, Jack could see 7 small faces pressed against the glass, watching, listening. Victor followed his gaze and waved at the children like he was greeting old friends. "Hello there, kids. Just 5 more days and you'll have real homes, or maybe you'd rather come back to me. I'm always willing to renegotiate. At a lower price, of course." Jack's vision narrowed to a red tunnel. Every muscle in his body screamed to draw the Colt to end Victor Kane right here and now. But that was exactly what Victor wanted. Violence. Proof that Jack was unstable, dangerous, unfit. Jack forced his hand away from the gun. "Get off my land." "It's not going to be your land much longer, is it?" "Not when you can't afford to run it without that $500 you threw away on defective merchandise." Victor gathered his reins. "I'll make you one last offer, Matthews. $300, and I'll withdraw my complaint. You can keep 2 of the kids, the little ones maybe. I'll take the other 5 off your hands." "I will never—" "5 days," Victor interrupted. "Clock's ticking. Think about it." He wheeled his horse and rode away, deputies following, all 3 of them laughing. Jack stood in the yard, shaking with rage, until their dust settled. That night the children didn't eat. They sat around the table in silence, staring at plates they didn't touch. Finally, Jack pushed his own plate away. "I'm going to fight this." Thomas looked up, his young face ancient with cynicism. "How you heard what he said. You're one man. They're the entire system." "Then I'll find help. People in this town lost children to Victor too. If we stand together—" "They won't." Thomas's voice was flat. "They're too scared. And even if they weren't, Judge Blackwood is in Victor's pocket. Everyone knows it." Jack had no answer. Because again the boy was right. Anna spoke up, her voice small for the first time since Jack had known her. "Why did you buy us? If you couldn't keep us." The question hit harder than Victor's threats. "I thought I could. I thought if I gave you a home, if I proved I could care for you, that would be enough." Samuel, always thinking 3 steps ahead, shook his head. "The law doesn't care about caring. It cares about paperwork, qualifications. You don't have those." Clara climbed down from her chair and limped over to Jack. She put her small hand on his. "We believe you tried, Papa Jack. That's more than anyone else did." The simple faith in her voice broke something in Jack's chest. After the children went to bed, Thomas found Jack in the barn slamming his fist into a support post hard enough to split the skin on his knuckles. "Mr. Jack?" Jack turned. His face was wet. "You shouldn't be up." Thomas came closer, this 12-year-old boy trying to be a man too soon. "Are you giving up on us?" "No, never. But you said you're helpless." "I said the law makes me helpless. That's different." Thomas studied Jack's face for a long moment. "My father used to say that sometimes the right thing and the legal thing aren't the same thing." Jack looked at this boy, this child who'd been stolen from his father and sold like property, who'd somehow held on to enough wisdom to teach lessons to grown men. "Your father's a smart man. Are you going to do the right thing, even if it's not legal?" Jack thought about that. Thought about taking the children and running. Disappearing into the territories where federal law was just a suggestion, becoming outlaws together. But that wasn't a life. That was survival, not living. "I'm going to try something else first. I'm going to ask for help." The next morning, Jack rode into Bitter Springs alone. The children had begged to come, but he'd refused. This was going to be ugly, and they'd seen enough ugliness. His first stop was Dr. Henley's office. The old doctor looked up from his medical texts as Jack walked in. "Matthews, I heard about the letter. I need you to testify that the children are healthy, that I've been caring for them properly." Henley's face went grim. "I can do that. But Matthews, you're fighting Judge Blackwood. The man's as corrupt as they come. He's in Victor's pocket so deep he might as well be living there. Then I'll go over his head. Get a federal judge. That takes weeks. You have 5 days. Jack's jaw clenched. Then I'll make those 5 days count. His second stop was Elena Rivera's cantina. The Mexican woman who'd lost her granddaughter to Victor 3 years ago listened to Jack's plan with hard eyes. A petition, signatures from townspeople saying you're fit to raise those children. Yes, if enough people vouch for me, even Blackwood will have trouble ignoring it. Elena considered this. How many signatures do you need? 100. More if possible. She nodded slowly. I'll help. But Matthews, a lot of people in this town are scared of Victor. They won't risk signing their names to something that makes him angry. Then I'll find the ones who are angry enough to be brave. They spent the entire day going door to door. Jack, Elena, and Marcus Wells, the blacksmith who'd lost his son Thomas 3 years ago and just learned the boy was alive. Some people signed immediately. Parents who'd lost children, shopkeepers who'd been extorted, farmers who'd been cheated. Others slammed doors in Jack's face, too scared, too broken, too convinced that fighting was useless. By sunset, Jack had 47 signatures. Not enough. He rode back to the ranch as darkness fell, exhausted and discouraged, but not defeated. The children waited on the porch, 7 small shapes in the lamplight. Jack dismounted and walked toward them. He didn't try to hide the truth. I got 47 signatures today. I need at least 100, maybe more. Silence. Then Clara stood up. Her broken leg had healed enough that she could walk without the crutch, though she still limped. Then we'll help. Tomorrow we'll all go into town, all 7 of us, and we'll tell people the truth. Anna nodded fierce. We'll make them see. We'll make them understand. Samuel pushed his glasses up. Strategic approach. We should target families with children. They'll be more sympathetic. Thomas, who'd been silent, finally spoke. And if that doesn't work, Jack looked at him, this boy who'd learned too young not to hope. Then we fight harder. That night, Jack gathered all 7 children around the kitchen table. Tomorrow we're going to ask this town for help. Some people will say no, some might be cruel. But I need you all to be brave. Can you do that? 7 heads nodded. Clara reached across the table and took Jack's hand. We'll be brave, because you taught us how. Later, after the children slept, Jack stood at his bedroom window in the barn, looking at the house where light glowed soft and warm. 5 days. That's all they had. 5 days to convince a town that had looked away for years that now was the time to stand up. 5 days to prove that love mattered more than paperwork. 5 days to keep 7 children from being torn apart and sold back into the darkness they just escaped. Jack touched the photograph of Sarah in his pocket. Help me, he whispered. I don't know how to win this, but I can't lose them. Not now, not after I finally found what you told me to find. The wind rattled the barn windows. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and far out on the ridge, barely visible in the darkness, a silhouette sat on horseback, watching, waiting, Victor Kane circling like a vulture, patient and certain. Because men like Victor knew something that men like Jack were just learning. The law wasn't about justice. It was about power, and Victor Kane had all the power in Bitter Springs. But what Victor didn't know, what he couldn't see yet in the darkness, was that Jack Matthews had something more dangerous than power. He had 7 children who decided to fight back, and sometimes that was enough to change everything. The morning of January 2nd dawned cold and sharp. 3 days until the court hearing. 3 days until Judge Blackwood would decide whether 7 children stayed together or got scattered like ashes in the wind. Jack stood in the kitchen making breakfast while the 7 children dressed upstairs. His hands moved through the familiar motions of cracking eggs, slicing bread, but his mind was elsewhere. 47 signatures. Not nearly enough. Clara came down first, limping only slightly now. Her broken leg had healed faster than Dr. Henley predicted. The resilience of children, the doctor had said. Their bodies remember how to mend, if only hearts healed as quickly. Papa Jack, are we really all going into town today? Jack looked at her, this 8-year-old girl who'd been left to die in the desert and somehow found the strength to keep hoping. Yes, all of us, together. By the time the sun cleared the horizon, all 8 of them were loaded into the wagon. Thomas sat up front beside Jack, quiet but present. The other 6 children huddled in the back, wrapped in blankets against the cold. The ride into Bitter Springs took an hour. Nobody spoke much. The weight of what they were about to do pressed down on all of them. Elena Rivera met them at her cantina. She'd spread the word through her network of women who'd lost children, mothers, who'd been powerless families, who'd been broken by Victor Kane's machine. Inside the cantina, more than 50 people had gathered, farmers in work clothes, shopkeepers, widows, Even a few of Victor's former deputies who'd quit rather than keep doing his dirty work. Jack stood at the front of the room with 7 children arranged behind him like a shield wall. Or maybe he was their shield. Hard to tell which. "Thank you for coming," Jack began. His voice carried quiet authority, the kind earned through violence and loss, and choosing to build instead of destroy. "You all know why we're here. In 3 days, Judge Blackwood is going to try to take these children from me, split them up, send them back into the system that failed them." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some sympathetic, some skeptical. A man near the back spoke up, voice hard with doubt. "Why should we risk crossing Victor Kane for you? You're a stranger who showed up and bought some kids. That doesn't make you a hero." Jack didn't flinch. "You're right. It doesn't. But these children can speak for themselves." He stepped aside. Clara moved forward, small, limping, but with her chin up and her honey-colored eyes blazing with something that looked like defiance, born from survival. "My name is Clara Bennett. 3 weeks ago, Sheriff Kane's men found me in the desert where my mother left me. She didn't want to leave me. She was forced, threatened, given a choice between watching me die slow or giving me a chance in the desert." The room went absolutely silent. "Papa Jack found me. Paid $500 for all 7 of us. Could have bought just one. Could have left us to be sold separate, but he didn't." Her voice gained strength. "He's the first man who ever asked my name before telling me what to do. The first one who said I had choices. The first one who loved us without needing a reason." A woman in the crowd wiped her eyes, then another. Thomas stepped forward, next 12 years old and already carrying the weight of a man who'd seen too much. "I'm Thomas Brooks, Marcus Wells' son. 3 years ago, Victor Kane sold me to a Louisiana plantation. Said my father couldn't pay his debts. Took me from my home, put me on a wagon south, and I thought I'd never see my father again." Marcus Wells stood up from where he'd been sitting in the back. The blacksmith's face was wet. "Papa Jack promised to find my father," Thomas continued. "And he did. Wrote letters, made inquiries, because he understands what it means to lose family." Anna came forward, fists clenched, voice shaking with controlled rage. "I'm Anna Moretti. I'm 10 years old, and I've been sold 3 times. First time I was 7. Man who bought me used me to clean his house. Worked me 16 hours a day. Beat me when I was slow. Second time I was 8. Woman who bought me locked me in a cellar when I talked back. Third time, Papa Jack bought all of us, and for the first time, someone asked what I wanted." She paused, swallowed hard. "He taught me to shoot, not because he wanted me to be violent, because he wanted me to be able to protect myself. He said every person deserves the right to say no with force if they have to." Samuel pushed his glasses up and stepped forward, this 9-year-old boy with the mind of an accountant and the heart of someone who'd learned too young that the world ran on cruelty disguised as economics. "I'm Samuel Chen. My parents died of cholera 2 years ago. The state took me, put me in 3 different homes. Each one used me for labor and fed me scraps. Papa Jack gave me a job, a real job, managing the ranch accounts. He pays me. Not much, but he pays me. Because he says work deserves compensation. That's more respect than any adult ever showed me." Emily, the 6-year-old who hadn't spoken in 2 years, moved to the front. She stood there, tiny and silent, clutching her cornhusk doll. The crowd waited. Some looked uncomfortable. A mute child couldn't testify, couldn't convince anyone. Then Emily opened her mouth. The words came out halting, rusty from disuse, but they came. "Pop, Pop." Every person in the cantina froze. "Papa Jack is—" She stopped, struggling, her small face scrunched with concentration. Thomas put a hand on her shoulder. Clara took her hand. Emily tried again. "Papa Jack is person who not yell." The grammar was broken, the syntax strange, but the meaning was crystal clear. Mama yell, hit, say Emily broken, say Emily use less. Each word was a battle. But Papa Jack say, Emily not broken. Emily just find right words. Tears streamed down Emily's face. "Today, Emily find words." Then she did something nobody expected. She ran across the room and threw herself at Jack, wrapping her arms around his legs. "Papa, love, Papa." The cantina erupted, not in applause, in crying. 50 people hardened by frontier life and loss, weeping at the sight of a mute child finding her voice to defend the man who'd given her safety. Elena Rivera stood up, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her weathered face. "I lost my granddaughter Maria 3 years ago. Victor took her for debts. Said she was 6 years old and worth $150 in Mexico. I never saw her again." Her voice went hard. "I won't let him take 7 more. I'm signing." An old man rose, trembling. "My grandson, David Stone, taken last year. If there's a chance to stop this monster, I'll sign." One by one, people stood, shared stories, signed their names. By the time the meeting ended, Jack had 127 signatures, more than enough. But as they left the cantina, Jack saw Victor Kane across the street watching. The sheriff's face was expressionless, but his eyes promised violence. That night, Jack woke to the smell of smoke. He rolled out of his bedroll in the barn loft, already moving before his mind caught up. Fire? Close. Getting closer. He hit the ladder running, boots barely touching the rungs, burst out of the barn, and his heart stopped. The barn was burning. Flames climbed the west wall, hungry and fast, eating dry wood that hadn't seen rain in months. Inside, Ash screamed. The gray mare's terrified whinnies cut through the roar of fire. "Thomas!" Jack bellowed toward the house. The boy appeared in the doorway in his nightclothes, took one look at the barn, and ran. Together, they plunged into the smoke. Heat slammed into them like a physical force. Visibility dropped to nothing. Jack felt his way to Ash's stall, found the latch by touch, wrenched it open. The mare reared, eyes rolling white with panic. Jack grabbed her halter, talking low and urgent. "Easy, girl, easy. We're getting out." Thomas appeared beside him, coughing hard. Together they pulled the terrified horse toward where the door should be. Couldn't see it. Couldn't breathe. The heat was unbearable. Then cool air. They'd made it outside. Jack pushed Ash toward the open field and turned back. The barn was a third gone already. The section where he'd stored winter feed, where he'd kept supplies that were supposed to last until spring. All of it burning. The other children had come out of the house now, standing in the yard in their nightclothes, watching the flames. Jack stood there, face blackened with soot, and felt 15 years of work turning to ash. That's when he saw it, nailed to the fence post. A note, the paper clean and white against the charred wood. Jack walked over and pulled it down, read it by the light of his burning barn. Fire spreads, to houses, to children. Sell them back to me. Everything stops. $300. Offer expires in 2 days. No signature. Didn't need one. Jack crumpled the note in his fist. Anna appeared beside him, her face illuminated by the flames. "We fight back." Jack looked at this 10-year-old girl who'd learned that violence was sometimes the only language the world understood. No, that's what he wants. We fight him tomorrow, in court, with the law. But even as he said it, Jack wondered if the law meant anything when the judge was bought and paid for. The next night, January 3rd, Anna volunteered for watch duty. Jack hesitated, but the girl's face was set with determination. "I can do this, Papa. Let me help." Thomas volunteered to join her. The two of them, a 12-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl, armed with the rifle Jack had taught Anna to use, sitting in the cold darkness, watching for Victor's men. They came at 2 a.m, 3 shapes moving low through the darkness, carrying torches. Anna saw them first. She raised the rifle, sighted carefully the way Jack had taught her, and fired. The shot cracked through the night. The bullet didn't hit anyone. Wasn't meant to, but it passed close enough that all 3 men dove for cover. Anna chambered another round. "Next one won't miss." Her voice carried across the yard, strong and clear. "We know you're there. We're armed. Leave now or find out what happens." The 3 shapes scrambled back toward the tree line and disappeared. Jack came running from the barn, Colt drawn, to find Anna and Thomas standing guard, the rifle still smoking. "They came. We stopped them." Anna's face was fierce with pride. Jack looked at her, this child who'd been sold and beaten and broken, now standing tall, with a weapon in her hands and fire in her eyes. "You did good, Anna. You protected our home." The words slipped out without thinking. Our, not my. Our. Anna's face softened. For the first time since Jack had known her, she looked at him without suspicion. "You really think of this as our home, all of us?" "Yes." "Then I guess that makes you my papa, for real." She said it casual, like it didn't matter, but Jack saw her hand shaking on the rifle. He pulled her into a hug. She stiffened for a second, then melted against him. "I got you," he said quietly. "All of you. Nobody's taking you away." The morning of January 4th dawned clear and cold. 1 day until the hearing, 1 day until everything. Jack was in the barn checking on Ash when he heard a horse approaching. He grabbed his Colt and moved to the door. Marcus Wells rode into the yard on a sturdy workhorse. But Marcus wasn't alone. Behind him came a wagon, and in that wagon sat 3 people. A woman in her 50s, a teenage boy, and a man Jack didn't recognize. Marcus dismounted, his weathered face split with a smile wider than Jack had ever seen. "Matthews, I got news." Thomas came running from the house. He skidded to a stop when he saw his father. "Pop." Marcus turned to his son, and Jack watched something beautiful happen. A father who'd thought his child was lost forever, looking at that child standing whole and alive. Marcus walked to Thomas and pulled him into a crushing embrace. "I got the letter," Marcus said, his voice thick, "from the Louisiana plantation. They freed you under the new enforcement laws. You're a free man, Thomas. And I have legal documentation that says you're my son, and I have the right to reclaim you." Thomas pulled back, looking stricken. "But I want to stay here, with Papa Jack, with the others. They're my family now, too." Marcus's eyes went to Jack. For a long moment, the two men looked at each other. Understanding passed between them, the kind that didn't need words. "Matthews," Marcus said, "you saved my boy when I couldn't. You gave him a home when I'd lost all hope of seeing him again. I owe you everything." "You don't owe me anything." Thomas earned his place here. Marcus shook his head. "You don't understand. Tomorrow at the hearing, I'm testifying. I'm standing with you. And after it's done, Thomas can choose. Live with me. Live with you. Visit both. Whatever he wants. Because family isn't about ownership. It's about love." Thomas looked between the two men who both loved him, both wanted what was best for him, and for the first time in 3 years, his face relaxed into something like peace. "Can I really have both?" "Yes," both men said at once. That evening, 9 people gathered around the table at Cole Ranch. Jack, 7 children, and Marcus Wells. Jack looked at each face. Clara with her honey-colored eyes, Thomas with his father's strength, Anna with her hard-won courage, Samuel with his quick mind, Emily who'd found her voice, David and Rachel who reminded him what joy looked like. "Tomorrow we go to court," Jack said. "Judge Blackwood will ask you questions. He'll ask if you want to stay here or be placed with other families. I need you to tell the truth, all of you. If any of you are scared, if any of you want something different, say so. I won't be angry. I just want you happy." 7 children looked at each other. Some silent conversation passed between them. Clara spoke for all of them. "We already decided, Papa. We're going to tell the judge that we choose you. Not because we have to, not because we're grateful you saved us, but because you're the first person who chose us just for love. No other reason. And that's what family is." Jack's vision blurred. He tried to speak and couldn't. 15 years of grief and guilt and self-imposed isolation, breaking apart under the weight of 7 children's faith. Anna stood up and walked around the table. She put her small hand on Jack's shoulder. "You taught us something, Papa. You taught us that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. It just means we're still figuring out how to heal." Thomas nodded. "You showed us strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up." Samuel pushed his glasses up. "You demonstrated that value comes from character, not productivity." Emily whispered, still struggling with words, but determined. "You prove people can be good." David and Rachel climbed into Jack's lap, one on each knee. "You make us laugh," Rachel said. "And you keep us safe," David added. Jack wrapped his arms around all of them, this impossible family he'd built from broken pieces. "I love you," he said. The words came out rough, unpracticed. He hadn't said them since Sarah died. "All 7 of you, I love you," 7 voices answered. "We love you too, Papa." Outside the window, hidden in the darkness, Victor Kane sat on his horse and watched the scene through the lit windows. He'd ridden out to do one final check to make sure Jack understood the stakes. But, watching the old gunfighter, surrounded by children, watching them laugh and cry and hold each other, Victor felt something unfamiliar twist in his gut, not guilt. Victor had burned that out of himself years ago, but something close to it. A recognition that he was looking at something he'd never have, something he'd spent his whole life destroying because he couldn't possess it. Love. Real, uncomplicated, freely given love. Victor turned his horse and rode back toward Bitter Springs. Tomorrow he'd destroy it. He'd use the law like a weapon and tear that family apart. Because that's what he did. That's all he knew how to do. But for just a moment, watching through that window, Victor Kane had looked at what his life could have been if he'd made different choices. And the emptiness of his own existence yawned before him like a grave. January 5th, 1885. The day everything would either break or become unbreakable. Jack woke before dawn in the barn loft. He hadn't slept. Just lay there, staring at the rafters, running through every possible scenario, every argument, every way this could go wrong. At 5, he gave up pretending and went to make breakfast. The 7 children came down one by one, already dressed in their best clothes. Clara wore a simple blue dress that Elena Rivera had altered to fit her. Thomas had on clean work clothes, scrubbed until the fabric was nearly white. Anna wore a dress for the first time since Jack had known her, though she looked uncomfortable as a cat in water. Samuel had polished his glasses until they gleamed. Emily wore a white dress that made her look even smaller than she was. David and Rachel were in matching outfits, holding hands as always. They looked like children going to church, or to their own execution. Nobody ate much. Toast sat untouched. Eggs grew cold. The kitchen filled with the sound of forks scraping plates, and nothing more. Jack cleared his throat. Whatever happens today, I want you all to know something. These past 3 weeks have been the best of my life. All of you, you saved me, not the other way around." Clara looked up, eyes already wet. "But we're going to win, right, Papa? They won't split us up." Jack wanted to lie, wanted to promise her victory, but he'd never lied to these children, and he wouldn't start now. "I don't know, but I know we'll fight. And I know that no matter what Judge Blackwood decides, you seven are family. Nothing changes that." Thomas stood up. "Then let's go show them what family looks like." The ride into Bitter Springs took an hour. Jack drove the wagon with all 7 children in back, Marcus Wells riding alongside on horseback. As they approached the town, Jack saw the streets were already crowded. As they prepared to enter the courthouse, Anna pulled Jack aside behind the wagon. Her face was set with determination. "Papa, I'm not going in there unarmed." Jack started to protest, but she cut him off with a look that reminded him too much of himself. "You taught me to protect my family. That's what I'm doing." She opened her hand to show him the small Derringer pistol, no bigger than her palm. Marcus Wells had pressed it into her hand that morning with a nod that said he understood. Jack looked at the tiny weapon, then at his 10-year-old daughter's face. "If trouble starts, you stay down. You only shoot if there's no other choice. Understand?" "Yes, Papa." "And Anna, you hide that well. If the bailiff finds it, we're done before we start." She tucked the Derringer into a hidden pocket in her dress that Elena Rivera had sewn specifically for this purpose. "I know what I'm doing." Jack pulled her into a quick hug. "I know you do. That's what scares me." Word had spread. This wasn't just another court proceeding. This was the day Bitter Springs would decide what it stood for. The courthouse sat in the center of town, a 2-story brick building with white columns meant to look impressive. To Jack, it looked like a mausoleum. Outside, maybe 200 people had gathered. Some held signs. "Let them stay." "Family first." Others held different signs. "Protect our children." "No single men." The crowd parted as Jack's wagon approached. Some people reached out to touch the children's hands. Others spat on the ground. Victor Kane stood on the courthouse steps with 4 deputies flanking him. He was dressed in his best black suit badge, polished bright gun belt gleaming. He looked like law incarnate. He smiled as Jack helped the children down from the wagon. "Matthews, glad you could make it. Wouldn't want you to miss this." Jack ignored him and led the 7 children up the steps. Marcus followed close behind. Elena Rivera joined them along with Dr. Henley in his wheelchair and 30 other townspeople who'd signed the petition. Inside, the courtroom was packed, every bench filled, people standing along the walls, the air thick with tension and the smell of too many bodies in too small a space. At the front, Judge Harold Blackwood sat behind his bench like a vulture on a fence post. 65 years old, white hair swept back, black robes hanging loose on his thin frame, cold eyes that calculated profit before justice. He banged his gavel. "Order! This court is now in session. The matter before us is Territory versus Jackson Matthews regarding the custody of 7 minor children." Jack and the children sat in the front row, Marcus beside them. The children pressed close together, David and Rachel practically sitting in Clara's lap. A man in an expensive suit stood up. "Mr. Sterling Victor's lawyer. Slick hair, sharp eyes, the kind of man who could make cruelty sound reasonable. Your Honor, the Territory has grave concerns about Mr. Matthews' fitness as a guardian." He walked to the center of the courtroom, playing to the audience. "Jackson Matthews is 44 years old, unmarried, living alone in a remote ranch with no steady income beyond trapping and odd jobs. His history includes 7 confirmed killings in Abilene in 1872. He suffers from documented trauma and has lived as a recluse for 15 years. Sterling paused for effect. "And 3 weeks ago, this man suddenly decides to purchase 7 children at auction, 5 of them girls. We must ask ourselves, what kind of man wants that arrangement? What are his true motives?" The implication hung in the air like poison. Jack's hands clenched into fists. Anna half stood face red with fury, but Thomas pulled her back down. Sterling continued, his voice dripping false concern. "Furthermore, in just 3 weeks, Mr. Matthews has convinced these traumatized children to call him Papa. This is textbook manipulation. These children are not making free choices. They're exhibiting symptoms of Stockholm Syndrome, attaching to their captor out of survival instinct." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom, some nodding, some looking uncomfortable. "The Territory moves that these children be removed from Mr. Matthews immediately and placed with proper 2-parent households or appropriate institutions where they can receive professional care." Sterling sat down, looking satisfied. Judge Blackwood turned to Jack. "Mr. Matthews, do you have representation?" Jack stood. "No, Your Honor. Can't afford a lawyer. I'll speak for myself." Blackwood's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Proceed." Jack walked to the center of the courtroom, every eye in the building fixed on him. He wasn't used to speaking in public, wasn't comfortable with words the way he was with actions, but these children needed him to find the right ones. Your Honor, Mr. Sterling is right about some things. I'm not perfect. I killed 7 men in '72. They were the Comancheros who murdered my wife Sarah while she was 6 months pregnant with our first child. The courtroom went absolutely silent. I lived with that guilt for 15 years, thought I was done, thought I had nothing left to give the world. Then I saw 7 children being sold like livestock in the town square, saw a little girl get slapped for trying to keep her family together. Jack's voice grew stronger. I didn't buy those children because I wanted to own them. I bought them because it was the only way to save them. And yes, they call me Papa. Not because I forced them to, because I asked them what they wanted, and for the first time in their lives, someone actually listened to the answer. He turned to look at the 7 children. Mr. Sterling talks about 2-parent households. My wife is dead. I can't change that. But I can give these children something more important than a marriage certificate. I can give them safety, respect, love without conditions. Jack faced the judge again. You want to talk about fitness? I've fed them every day, clothed them, taught them skills, got Clara's leg healed by Doc Henley, reunited Thomas with his father, taught Anna to protect herself, let Samuel manage accounts because he's good with numbers, helped Emily find her voice after 2 years of silence. His voice dropped intimate, like he was talking to one person instead of a packed courtroom. Family isn't about paperwork, Your Honor. It's not about checking boxes on a form. It's about showing up every day and choosing to love someone even when it's hard, even when they test you, even when the world tells you it's impossible. He paused. If this court says I'm not fit because I'm single, then you're saying only married people deserve to love children. If you say I'm not fit because I'm poor, you're saying only the wealthy deserve families. If you say I'm not fit because of my past, you're saying broken people can never be made whole. Jack's eyes found Judge Blackwood's. I'm asking this court one question. What is family? Is it blood, documents, social standing? Or is it 7 children who choose to stay with a man who chose them first? He sat down. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Blackwood banged his gavel. Order, the court will now hear testimony from the children themselves. Clara stood first. She walked to the witness box, limping slightly, and climbed up. Her legs barely reached the floor. The bailiff held out a Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth? Clara's voice came out small but clear. I do. Judge Blackwood looked down at her. Clara Bennett, are you being held against your will by Mr. Matthews? No, sir. Has he ever hurt you? No, sir. When I had nightmares, he sat by my bed until I fell asleep. When my leg hurt, he carried me. When I cried, he held me. Blackwood's face remained neutral. Why do you call him Papa? Clara's eyes filled with tears. Because when I asked if he'd sell me back, if I was bad, he said no. When I asked how long I could stay, he said, as long as I wanted. When I asked if he loved me, he said yes. And I believe him. For the first time ever, I believe someone when they say they love me. Her voice broke on the last word. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Papa is the first person who didn't leave me. Please don't make me leave him. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of people crying. Jack saw hardened cowboys wiping their eyes, women openly weeping. Even the bailiff looked away. Thomas went next. 12 years old, trying to be brave, but his voice shook. I'm Thomas Brooks. 3 years ago, Victor Kane sold me away from my father, told me I'd never see him again. But Papa Jack found him, brought him back. And then Papa said I could choose, live with my real father or stay at the ranch or both. He gave me a choice. Nobody ever gave me a choice before. He looked at Marcus Wells, sitting in the front row. I choose both. Because Papa Jack taught me that family can grow. You don't have to choose one person over another. You can love both. Anna went third. She climbed into the witness box wearing the dress she hated, but her voice came out strong. I'm Anna Moretti. I'm 10 years old, and I've been through 3 owners before Papa Jack. Every single one used me for work and gave me nothing. Papa Jack gave me a job managing the horses, and he pays me. Actual money. Because he says work deserves wages. She paused. And he taught me to shoot. Not because he wanted me to be violent, because he said every person deserves the right to say no and mean it. He respects me. That's more than any adult ever did. Samuel testified about being given responsibility. Emily stood in the witness box, struggling with words, fighting to speak. Judge Blackwood looked at her gently. Emily, you don't have to speak if it's too hard. But Emily shook her head. She gripped the edge of the witness box and forced the words out. Jack is first person who not yell. When Emily, no talk. Every syllable was a battle. Mama say, Emily broken. Defect. Defective. But Papa say, Emily perfect, just finding words. She looked directly at Jack and her face transformed. Pure love, pure trust, pure joy. Today Emily find best words. And then she said it, the two words that would echo through the courthouse and through Jack's heart for the rest of his life. Papa. Love Papa. Emily jumped down from the witness box and ran across the courtroom. Jack stood and caught her as she launched herself into his arms. She wrapped her small arms around his neck and cried into his shoulder, repeating over and over, Papa, Papa, Papa. The courtroom exploded, not in applause, in collective weeping. 200 people watching a mute child find her voice to defend the man who'd loved her back to speech. Jack held Emily and cried. 15 years of grief pouring out. 15 years of believing he was too broken to deserve love. All of it washing away in the tears of a 6-year-old girl who decided he was worth fighting for. David and Rachel ran to join them, then Clara, then Anna, Thomas, Samuel. All 7 children surrounding Jack, holding him, being held crying and laughing and whole. Judge Blackwood sat frozen at his bench. For the first time in years, maybe decades, his carefully constructed mask of judicial indifference cracked. His eyes were wet. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, the courtroom doors slammed open. A man strode in wearing a long coat and a flat-brimmed hat. On his chest a silver star, not the tin badge Victor's deputies wore. Federal, U.S. Marshal John Pike. He walked down the center aisle, boots echoing on wood, and stopped in front of the bench. Your Honor, I'm Marshal Pike, Federal Law Enforcement. I've been investigating Sheriff Victor Kane for 6 months. I have warrants for his arrest on charges of human trafficking, corruption, conspiracy, and murder. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Victor Kane stood up, face going from confident to pale in seconds. Pike pulled papers from his coat. I've documented 12 children sold through Kane's network over 3 years. I have testimony from buyers in Mexico, California, and Louisiana. I have financial records showing payoffs to local officials. He looked directly at Judge Blackwood. Including regular payments to you, Your Honor. Blackwood's face went white. Pike continued relentless. This hearing is a sham. Victor Kane has been using the legal system to facilitate child trafficking. And you, Judge Blackwood, have been complicit. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Blackwood did something nobody expected. He stood up. His hands shook as he removed his judicial robes. Marshal Pike is correct. His voice came out broken. I've been taking money from Victor Kane for 3 years. I've looked the other way while children disappeared. I've used this court as a weapon against anyone who opposed him. He looked at Jack and the 7 children. But today, I saw something I haven't seen in a long time. I saw what family actually means, and I realized what I've become. Blackwood's voice gained strength. I hereby grant Jackson Matthews full legal custody of these 7 children. Furthermore, I'm recusing myself from this bench and submitting my resignation to the territorial governor. He picked up his gavel one last time. Victor Kane, you are under arrest. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court has none left to give. He brought the gavel down. Victor Kane's hand dropped to his gun. Everything happened at once. Pike shouted a warning. Deputies reached for their weapons. The crowd screamed and dove for cover. Victor drew his pistol and fired. Not at Pike, not at Jack, at Clara. The bullet sang through the air. Jack saw it in slow motion, saw exactly where it would hit, saw the 8-year-old girl in its path. He threw himself forward, pushing Clara behind him. The bullet meant for her caught him in the shoulder instead. Hot pain exploded through his arm. He fell. And in the chaos, Victor grabbed Clara by her hair and dragged her toward the back door, gun pressed to her temple. Nobody moves, or I kill her right here. The courthouse froze. 200 people, including a federal marshal, all stopped by the sight of a desperate man with a gun to a child's head. Victor backed toward the door, using Clara as a shield. Matthews, he shouted, you tell Pike to drop those warrants or I blow her brains out. You hear me? Jack struggled to his knees, blood soaking through his shirt. His vision blurred, but his voice came out steady. Victor, let her go. Take me instead. You're a dead man already. I want my freedom. Clara's voice small and terrified. Papa. The words stopped Victor cold. He looked down at the girl he was holding, really looked at her. And for just a second, something crossed his face. Not quite regret, but recognition. Seeing what he'd become reflected in the eyes of a terrified child. Then the moment passed. His face went hard again. 5 seconds. Pike drops the warrants or she dies. 5, 4, 3. Anna's voice rang out from the back of the courtroom. Get down, Clara. Clara went limp, dropping her weight suddenly. Victor's grip slipped for just a second. A shot rang out. Anna Moretti stood on a bench near the back, the small Derringer pistol clutched in both her trembling hands. Smoke curled from the barrel. The recoil had nearly knocked her backward, but she'd held firm. The single shot from the tiny weapon had been enough. The bullet caught Victor in the shoulder, the same shoulder where he'd shot Jack. He dropped his gun, dropped Clara, fell to his knees. Pike and his deputies rushed forward, securing Victor before he could recover. Clara ran to Jack, threw herself into his arms. He held her with his good arm, the injured one hanging useless. "I got you," he whispered. "I got you." All 7 children surrounded him again, a wall of small bodies protecting their father who'd just taken a bullet for them. Jack looked up and saw the entire courtroom on its feet, not cheering, crying, witnessing something they'd never forget. Marshal Pike knelt beside Jack. "We need to get you to a doctor. The children first. Make sure they're safe." "They're safe, Matthews. You made sure of that." Dr. Henley wheeled himself forward, already pulling bandages from his bag, and as he worked to stop the bleeding as 7 children held onto their papa and refused to let go. "Jackson." Matthews closed his eyes and felt something he hadn't felt since Sarah died. Complete. The bullet had gone clean through Jack's shoulder, missing bone but tearing muscle. Dr. Henley worked in the courthouse while Victor Kane was dragged away in chains, his screams of protest fading into the January afternoon. Marshal Pike stood over Victor as deputies locked iron cuffs around his wrists. "Victor Kane, you're under arrest for human trafficking, conspiracy, attempted murder, and corruption. You'll stand trial in federal court in San Antonio, and this time there's no judge to buy." Victor's face twisted with rage and something else. Fear. Real fear. The kind that comes when a man realizes his power was never real, just a shared delusion that finally broke. "You think this changes anything?" Victor spat. "There are hundreds like me. Thousands. You can't stop all of us." Victor's eyes locked on Jack, and something broke open behind them. Not remorse, but a desperate need to be understood. "You want to know why, Matthews? You want to know what makes a monster?" Jack said nothing, just waited. "I was 10 years old when they sold me to a mine boss in New Mexico. 10. Worked 16 hours a day in the dark. Got beaten when I was too slow. Watched a boy named Daniel die next to me. 12 years old, collapsed from exhaustion, and nobody cared. Nobody saved us." Victor's voice went raw. "So I learned that children are just currency, that the strong take from the weak, that the world is cruel, so you better be crueler first." He laughed, bitter and broken. "You and me, Matthews, we're the same. Both products of a broken system, both hurt as kids. The only difference is you found someone who showed you another way. I never found my Sarah." Jack stepped closer, his voice quiet but carrying. "That's not the only difference, Victor. You chose to become the thing that hurt you. I chose to fight against it. We both had pain. We both had trauma. But I decided to break the cycle. You decided to keep it going." Jack's eyes were hard. "So no, we're not the same. You're what I could have been if I'd given up on the idea that people can be better than their worst moments." Jack, bandaged and pale but standing, walked over to Victor. His good hand gripped the man's collar. "Don't need to stop all of you. Just needed to stop you from hurting these 7. Victor stared at Jack, then at the 7 children clustered behind him like a shield wall. For the first time, something like comprehension crossed his face. "You actually love them, you crazy old fool. You actually love them." Jack's voice came out quiet, absolute. "That's the difference between us. You never learned what love was. I forgot for 15 years. These children reminded me." He let go of Victor and stepped back. Marshal Pike hauled Victor to his feet. "Federal trial starts in 3 weeks. San Antonio Courthouse. I'll be testifying personally." Pike looked at Jack. "I'll need statements from you and the children, but take your time. Heal first." Victor was dragged from the courthouse. The crowd parted in silence, watching as the man who'd terrorized Bitter Springs for 3 years was finally brought to justice. When the doors closed behind him, the courthouse erupted in applause. But Jack didn't hear it. He was surrounded by 7 children, all of them crying, all of them holding on to him like he might disappear. "Papa, you could have died," Clara sobbed into his chest. Jack knelt down, wincing as the movement pulled his injured shoulder. "But I didn't, and you're safe. That's all that matters." Anna pushed through her face, wet with tears and guilt. "I shot him. I could have hit Clara. I could have missed. I could have—" Jack pulled her close with his good arm. "You saved her life. You did what I taught you. You protected your family." The word hung in the air. Family. Not his children. Their family. Shared, equal, built together. Judge Blackwood approached, having shed his robes, looking smaller without them. Older. More human. "Mr. Matthews, I owe you an apology. I've spent 3 years being a coward, watching children disappear and telling myself it wasn't my responsibility." His voice cracked. "Today you showed me what courage actually looks like, and what family means." Jack stood slowly, steadying himself on Thomas's shoulder. "You did the right thing in the end, Judge. That counts for something. Blackwood shook his head. Too little. Too late. But maybe telling the truth today will help someone else find the courage to stand up sooner. He looked at the 7 children. You're lucky, all of you, to have found each other, to have found him. Clara stepped forward. We know. The crowd began to disperse. Elena Rivera appeared with tears streaming down her weathered face. Matthews, you did it. You actually beat the system. We beat it, all of us together. Marcus Wells approached his son Thomas beside him. Jack, about Thomas. We talked it over, and we want to make it official. He'll live at your ranch during the week, help with work, be with his brothers and sisters. Weekends, he'll come to my smithy, learn the trade. That way, he gets both families. Thomas looked between the 2 men who both loved him. Is that really okay? I can have both. Jack and Marcus spoke at the same time. Yes. The ride back to Cole Ranch took longer than usual. Jack's shoulder throbbed with every bump in the road. But he sat in the wagon bed with all 7 children pressed against him, and the pain felt distant, unimportant. Somewhere between the courthouse and home, Samuel spoke up. Papa Jack, what happens now? Jack thought about that. Now we live, we build, we grow. We show the world that family isn't about bloodlines or paperwork. It's about choosing each other every single day. Clara rested her head on his good shoulder. And we'll keep choosing you, Papa, forever. Forever is a long time, little bird. Not long enough. When they reached the ranch, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The barn Jack and the children had repaired together stood solid. The garden Emily had brought back to life showed the first green shoots of spring growth. The house glowed warm with lamplight. Home, real home. The kind built on love instead of obligation. That night all 8 of them gathered around the kitchen table. Jack's shoulder was properly bandaged, now arm in a sling. He was supposed to rest, but there was dinner to make children, to feed a life, to continue living. Clara took over cooking duties, her movements confident now. Thomas brought in firewood. Anna set the table. Samuel tallied the day's expenses with satisfaction, everything accounted for. Emily hummed softly as she arranged flowers in a jar. David and Rachel played quietly in the corner, acting out the courthouse scene with their dolls. After dinner, as the children prepared for bed, Jack walked outside. He crossed to the barn and climbed carefully to the loft, his injured shoulder protesting. He pulled out the photograph of Sarah, now creased and faded from 15 years of carrying. We won, Sarah. The children are safe. They're mine. Legally, officially, permanently mine. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of fresh earth and growing things. I wish you could see them. See what we built together. See how they've healed me the way you wanted. Jack paused, listening to the sounds from the house. Laughter, running feet. Clara calling out that it was bedtime. Thomas answering back. The ordinary chaos of family. I loved them the way I loved you, completely, without reservation. They saved me, Sarah, just like you said someone would. He tucked the photograph back into his pocket and climbed down from the loft. Tomorrow he'd wake early, make breakfast, teach the children their lessons, work the ranch, live the life Sarah had wanted for him. But tonight he walked back to the house, and for the first time in 15 years, he didn't sleep in the barn. Tonight he slept in the house, in the small room next to the children's bedrooms, close enough to hear if they needed him, close enough to be Papa Jack, not just in name but in presence, close enough to be home. The years passed like water through gentle fingers. January of 1895. 10 years to the day since the courthouse hearing that changed everything. Victor Kane had been sentenced to hang by federal court in San Antonio 3 months after the hearing. 20 counts of human trafficking, 12 counts of conspiracy, 3 counts of attempted murder. The sentence was carried out on a cold morning in March of 1885. Jack hadn't attended the execution. Neither had the children. They'd learned that justice didn't require witnesses, only action. But Marshal Pike had sent a letter afterward describing Victor's final words on the gallows. Tell Matthews he was right. About choices. I made the wrong ones. It wasn't redemption. It was just acknowledgement. Sometimes that was all broken people could manage. Judge Harold Blackwood had resigned from the bench the day after the hearing and never practiced law again. He'd taken a job as a clerk in the Territorial Records Office, donated every penny of his salary to the orphanage Clara eventually opened. It wasn't enough to balance the scales, he'd told Jack once over coffee, but it was all an old man could do. Blackwood had died in 1892 of heart failure. Jack had attended that funeral. The old judge had earned at least that much recognition for choosing the right thing in the end, even if it came late. At the funeral, Blackwood's daughter had given Jack a letter her father had written, but never sent. Matthews, I watched you in that courtroom and saw what I'd stopped being. A man who cared more about what was right than what was easy. Thank you for reminding me. Blackwood. Jack had kept that letter, put it in the drawer with Sarah's recipes and the photograph he didn't need to look at anymore because her face was burned into his memory. Cole Ranch had transformed. The barn stood twice its original size, painted red with white trim. The house had been expanded, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper kitchen. Fences ran straight and strong around pastures where cattle grazed. The garden Emily had started now sprawled across half an acre, providing vegetables enough to sell in town. A wooden sign hung over the gate, carved with careful precision by Samuel's adult hands. Matthews Family Ranch, established 1884. The man who walked out to greet the morning sun was 54 years old, but looked 10 years younger than he had at 44. Silver hair, yes, but his eyes were bright, his shoulders straight. His smile came easy now, worn smooth by a decade of practice. Jackson Matthews stood on his porch and watched his family begin their day. Clara emerged from the house first. 18 years old now, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with features and everything to do with strength. She wore a simple dress and her hair in a practical braid. In her arms, a basket of books. She was the teacher now. 3 mornings a week she taught reading and writing to the children of Bitter Springs. The other days she taught the 3 new children who'd come to live at the ranch 2 years ago. More orphans, more broken pieces that Jack couldn't turn away. She saw Jack and smiled. "Morning, Papa. Coffee's ready." "You're up early?" "Thomas is coming by this morning. We're going to talk to you about something." Jack raised an eyebrow but didn't push. Clara would tell him when she was ready. Thomas arrived an hour later. 22 years old, broad-shouldered, from a decade of blacksmith work with his father, Marcus. But he still spent half his time at the ranch, still considered this home as much as his father's shop. He and Clara sat down with Jack on the porch. Both of them looked nervous. Jack waited. Patience was a skill he'd learned from 7 children who needed time to find their words. Thomas spoke first. "Mr. Jack, I want to ask your permission for something." "Go on." "I want to marry Clara." The words hung in the morning air. Jack looked at Thomas, this boy he'd helped raise, who called him Papa, even though Marcus was his blood father. Then he looked at Clara, his first daughter, the girl who'd been abandoned in the desert and somehow found the courage to hope again. "You love her, more than anything. Clara, you want this." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I know it's strange. We're not blood-related, but we grew up as brother and sister. But Papa, we're not related by blood, and what we feel, it's not like siblings. It's something else." Jack stood and walked to the porch rail, looked out at the ranch they'd built together. "When I bought you 10 years ago, the law said you were property. Merchandise, things to be owned." He turned back to them. "But you were never my children by blood. You were my children by choice. And if the choice is what made you family, then the choice is what defines the boundaries too." He smiled. "Thomas, you're a good man. You'll take care of her. Clara, you're strong enough to take care of yourself, but having a partner makes the journey easier. You have my blessing. Both of you." Clara launched herself at Jack, hugging him tight. Thomas shook his hand, then pulled him into an embrace as well. "Thank you, Papa, for everything, for saving us, for teaching us what family means." Jack's voice came out rough. "You saved me first." The rest of the day unfolded like a gift being unwrapped slowly. Anna rode in from town, her deputy sheriff's badge gleaming on her chest. 20 years old, fierce, respected the kind of law officer who protected instead of oppressed. She'd earned the badge 3 years ago, youngest deputy in territorial history. She dismounted and grinned at Jack. "Morning, old man. Heard Clara's getting married. About time. Don't you start." "Why not? I'm next. Got my eye on the new school teacher from San Antonio, man named James Wright. Good man, kind. Thinks women can do more than cook." Jack smiled. "Bring him by for dinner. I'll decide if he's good enough for my daughter." Anna laughed, but her eyes were wet. "Never thought I'd have a papa who cared enough to approve my choices." "You'll always have that, Anna, long as I'm breathing." Samuel appeared next, 19 years old, spectacles still perched on his nose, but filled out now, healthy. He ran the ranch's accounts and had started a small banking business in town, lending money to families Victor Kane had once extorted. "Papa, the ranch made $700 profit last year. I recommend expanding the cattle operation." Jack clapped him on the shoulder. "You're the accountant. I trust your numbers." Emily came from the garden, 16 years old, still quiet, but no longer silent. She spoke when she had something worth saying, and people listened because her words carried weight. "Papa, the vegetables are ready for market. I'll take them to town tomorrow." Her voice was clear now, confident. The stutter was gone, worked away through years of patient practice. David and Rachel, 14 years old, came running from the pasture. They'd grown tall, still inseparable, still finishing each other's sentences. "Papa, the new calves are doing well," David started. All 12 of them healthy, Rachel finished. We think we should name them after the months, David continued. January through December, Rachel concluded. Jack laughed. Whatever you want. As the sun reached its peak, all the children gathered. The original 7 plus the 3 new ones. A 10-year-old girl named Sophie who'd been found wandering the road. A 7-year-old boy named Michael who'd been abandoned at the church. A 5-year-old named Lucy who didn't speak yet, but Emily was working with her, teaching her that silence was safe, but words were powerful. 13 people around the table. A family that had started with 1 broken man and 7 terrified children, now grown into something that couldn't be contained by 1 house or 1 name. After lunch, Jack walked out to the small cemetery behind the house. 2 graves there now. The first was Sarah's, moved from Colorado with Marcus's help 5 years ago. Jack had wanted her close, wanted her to see what her faith in him had created. The second grave was old Joe Redfeathers. The Comanche elder who'd given them shelter had died peacefully 2 years back, surrounded by the children he'd helped save. They'd buried him on the ranch because he'd asked to rest where love lived. Jack stood between the graves and spoke quietly. Sarah Joe, wish you could see this. The children are grown, starting their own lives, but they keep coming back, because we taught them that family is where you're loved, not where you're born. A hand slipped into his. Clara had followed him. They can see Papa. Wherever they are, they know what you built. We built it, all of us together. No, Clara squeezed his hand. You built the foundation. You chose to save 7 broken children when you could have saved yourself. That choice, that's what made everything else possible. Jack's throat tightened. I was broken too. You healed me. Then we healed each other. That's what family does. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, all 13 of them gathered on the porch. The original 7 now grown. The 3 new ones still learning to trust. Marcus Wells, who'd become as much a father to all the children as Jack was. Elena Rivera, who'd never remarried but had found family in this strange collection of misfits. Jack stood at the porch rail and looked at the faces surrounding him. Some by blood to each other, most not. All connected by something stronger than genetics. Choice. Daily repeated stubborn choice to love each other through the hard times and the good. 10 years ago today, Jack began, I stood in a courthouse thinking I might lose everything, lose all of you. And I realized something. I wasn't scared of being alone again. I was scared of you being scattered to the wind, losing each other. He paused, gathering words. But we won. Not because the law was on our side, because love was, because enough people saw what we had and decided it was worth fighting for. Clara spoke up. Tell us the story again, Papa, about the day you bought us. Jack had told this story 100 times, would tell it 100 more, because stories were how families remembered who they were. December 23, 1884, cold enough to freeze spit. I rode into Bitter Springs planning to buy supplies and leave. Then I heard a child scream. The story unfolded like a familiar quilt. The auction, the slap, the $500, the wagon ride home, the first terrified night, the slow, painful building of trust. As Jack spoke, he watched the 3 new children listening with wide eyes. Sophie, Michael, Lucy, they needed to hear this, needed to know that the fear they felt now would pass, that broken things could be mended. When he finished, Sophie raised her hand like she was in school. Mr. Jack, will you keep us forever too, like you kept the others? Jack knelt down in front of her, ignoring the protest in his knees. Sophie forever is a promise I don't make lightly, but yes, you, Michael, Lucy, you're part of this family now, and family means you're stuck with us until you decide to leave. What if we never want to leave? Then you never have to. Michael, the 7-year-old who'd been abandoned, looked up at Jack with eyes that had seen too much. Why do you do it? Keep taking in kids nobody wants. Jack thought about that. Thought about Sarah's dying words. About 15 years of grief and isolation. About 7 children who'd saved him from himself. Because everybody deserves a second sunrise, Michael. A chance to see what they might become. Your first sunrise was hard, full of pain and loss. But your second sunrise, that's just starting. And I want to be there to see what you grow into. Lucy, the 5-year-old who didn't speak, climbed into Jack's lap. She didn't say anything, just curled up against him and closed her eyes. Emily smiled. She'll talk when she's ready, Papa. Some of us just need more time to find our voices. As darkness fell and stars began appearing one by one, the children started drifting off to bed. The new ones first, then the younger of the original 7. Finally, only Jack, Clara, Thomas, and Anna remained on the porch. Anna spoke first. Papa, what happens when you're gone, when you're not here to hold us together anymore. Jack had thought about this, thought about mortality and legacy and what he'd leave behind. You'll hold each other together. That's what I've been teaching you all along. I'm not the glue in this family. Love is. And love doesn't die when I do. Clara wiped her eyes. We'll pass it on, take in more children, more broken pieces, build what you started into something that outlasts all of us. That's all anyone can hope for, to leave the world a little better, to save a few people who needed saving, to love hard enough that it echoes. Thomas stood and stretched. I should head back to town. Pa will worry. Tell Marcus I said hello, and thank him for sharing you with us. After Thomas left, Clara and Anna both hugged Jack goodnight. He sat alone on the porch for a while longer, listening to the sounds of his ranch settling into sleep. Cattle lowing in the distance, horses nickering in the barn, the soft hoot of an owl hunting in the garden, and from inside the house the quiet breathing of 10 children who trusted him enough to sleep safely. Jack pulled out the photograph of Sarah one last time. The paper was thin now, worn from 15 years of handling, but her smile was still visible, still bright, still full of the hope that had saved him. I kept the promised love, found people who needed me, saved them, let them save me back, built something worth building. He looked up at the stars. I know you're up there somewhere, watching, proud I hope. I did my best, tried to honor what you taught me, that love is the only thing that matters, that broken people can be mended, that family is built, not born. The wind picked up warm despite the January cold. For just a second, Jack swore he smelled roses and vanilla, Sarah's perfume. Then it was gone. Jack stood and walked inside, past the living room where the original Sevens portraits hung on the wall, past the kitchen where Clara's cookbook sat open to Sarah's soup recipe, past the hallway where 10 children slept in 6 bedrooms, safe and warm and loved. He paused at the master bedroom door, the room that had been Sarah's, the room he hadn't entered for 15 years, then finally claimed again 5 years ago when he decided the living had to stop serving the dead. Inside he climbed into bed and closed his eyes. And Jackson Matthews, once called the Reaper, once a man so broken he thought he'd never heal, fell asleep, knowing that when he woke tomorrow he'd have 13 reasons to keep living, 13 people who'd chosen him, and whom he'd chosen right back. In the darkness a title formed, words that would be carved into stone someday when this story became legend. Between 1850 and 1900, more than 250,000 orphaned children were abandoned, sold, or trafficked across the American frontier. Most were never found. Their stories ended in darkness in places no one remembers among people who saw them as burdens instead of blessings. But some, a precious few, found their way to people like Jackson Matthews, people who understood that family is not defined by blood or paperwork or social standing. Family is defined by the choice to love someone even when the world says you shouldn't, even when it's hard, even when it costs everything you have. Those children, the ones who found their second sunrise, they grew up knowing something the world had tried to beat out of them, that they were worth saving, that they deserved love, that broken things given time and care and stubborn hope can be made whole again, and that legacy, that truth echoed down through generations. Long after Jackson Matthews was buried beside Sarah and old Joe, long after the ranch became a proper orphanage run by Clara and Thomas and their children, the network Victor Kane had been part of didn't die with him. Marshal Pike's letters continued to arrive over the years, reporting arrests in California, Louisiana, Mexico City. The machine was bigger than one man, bigger than one town. Children were still being trafficked, still being sold, still disappearing into the darkness. But every child Jack saved was a gear removed from that machine. Every person who chose to stand up instead of look away was another crack in the foundation. 13 children at Cole Ranch, 50 more at Clara's orphanage by 1900. Hundreds more touched by the story of the man who'd spent $500 and 15 years of grief to prove that love was stronger than law. The network continued, but so did the resistance, and in the end that was the only legacy that mattered. Not that evil existed, but that people kept choosing to fight it anyway. Long after Bitter Springs renamed itself Matthews Creek in honor of the man who'd taught them what justice actually meant, the echo continued in every child who found a home, in every broken person who discovered they could be mended, in every family built on choice instead of obligation. The echo of 7 children standing in an auction block, and one man who decided that $500 was a small price to pay for the chance to prove that love, real love, was stronger than law or custom or fear, that love could redeem, could heal, could save. not just children, but the people who chose to love them back. The end.